Again, students, and we're going to look at chapter 27. This is a two-part series, so this is part 1 of 2. As we go through this particular chapter, please make sure that your children are not around due to the graphic nature of the pictures that we are going to be displaying. Alright, so all living things, we know that they reproduce, correct? So reproduction, as we know, is the process by which organisms, they make more organisms like themselves. And reproduction is one of the things that are going to set living things aside or apart from these non-living things. But even though the reproductive system is essential to keeping species alive, unlike other body systems, it's not essential to keeping an individual alive. So here we're going to be looking at the male reproductive system. Now our genes live on in other offspring. So genes are going to be passed on from a parent to the child and so forth and so forth. So this chapter we're going to focus just on the general aspect of human reproductive biology and the role of the male in reproduction. What are we going to look at in this particular section of this particular video? Looking at the fundamental biological distinction between male and female, as well as the primary, secondary organs and the secondary sex characteristics. We should be able to explain the role of the sex chromosomes in determining a sex. I'll explain how the Y chromosome determines the response of the fetal gonoid to the prenatal hormones, identify which of the male or female external genitalia are homologous to each other, and of course to describe the descent of gonoids and explain why it is very important. Alright, so the essential of sexual reproduction is that it involves two sexes whose gametes, when combined, they form a zygote that develops into a new individual. Now the gametes must be mobile so that they can come into contact and must be able to provide nutrients for the zygotes. Now usually these tasks are apportioned to two different kinds of gametes. A small mobile one, which would be your sperm, and then a large nutrient laden, which would be our eggs. So we're looking at two different types of gametes. Our eggs carried by the female, and then the sperm that's carried by our male. So when we look at the terms, gametes basically are sex cells, and they're produced by each parent. And our zygote, which are fertilized eggs, and it has a combination of both parent genes. Of both parent genes. Alright, so how do we form this zygote? This zygote is basically formed when the male and female sex cells combine with each other. And that's how we form this fertilized egg, also called the zygote. Now one zygote has mobility, which is the sperm. So basically it's able to move around and get from place to place very quickly. And that's the sperm cells. Now the parent producing, we know that the male is the one that's going to produce the sperm, and the male is the one that has that Y chromosome. Now the egg is the one that's going to contain all the nutrients necessary for the egg to be developed, or for the embryo to be developed. The female, we know, carry those eggs, and the female is the one that's going to be lacking that Y chromosome. Oops. Okay, so we know that the male, they have an XY, and the females, let me get this Y looking a little better, and the female, they have an XX. Okay. Now, in mammals now, In mammals, let me see if I can go back, sorry. In mammals, female is the parent that provides a sheltered internal environment and prenatal nutrition for the embryo. Okay, so the male reproductive system, it serves to produce the sperm, of course, and then is introduced into the female body. Now the male, it has a copulatory organ, which is called the penis, and is therefore introducing these gametes into the female reproductive tract. Now the female reproductive system, we know that it produces these eggs, it's going to receive the sperm, it's going to provide gametes to be united with each other, is going to harbor or hold that fetus, as well as nourish the fetus during the proper development stage. And of course, the female has a copulatory organ. It's called the vagina, and that's therefore receiving the sperm. Let's see if I can clear this off the. I think I did it. Okay. So the reproductive system, it consists of primary and secondary sex organs. The primary sex organs, or the gonoids, those are there to produce the gametes. And those are like the testes of the male and the ovaries of the female. Now the secondary sex organs are organs other than the gonoids that are necessary for reproduction. So in the male, they comprise the system of the ducts, glands, and the penis, and they're concerned with storage, survival, as well as convenient, as well as delivery of the sperm. Now in the females, they include the uterine tubes, the uterus, the vagina, and those are concerned with uniting the sperm with the egg, and of course holding or harboring the developing fetus. Now according to location, the reproductive organs are classified as external or internal genitalia. The external genitalia are located in the perineum, and the internal genitalia are located mainly in the pelvic cavity, except for the male testes and some associated ducts in the scrotum. Now the secondary sex characteristics are features that distinguish the sexes, and then they play a role in attraction between the two mates. Now they typically appear as an animal approaches any type of sexual maturity. Now in humans, the physical attributes that contribute to mate attraction are culturally contributed to a great degree. Now in both sexes, we have pubic and axillary hair that are associated, and their associated sex glands, and the pitch of the voice. Those are generally accepted as signs of sexual maturity. So when a male's voice starts to change and gets a little bit deeper, or male and female start getting hair in the pubic region, and of course in the axillary region, talking about underarms, those are usually signs of puberty. And of course you have in the males that will come up with facial hair, starts a little coarser, they start getting chest hair, and their physique starts to change slightly, become a little bit more muscular. And for females, of course, we're going to have fat distributed in different regions, start developing breasts, and then and basically hair in certain areas as well, and then hair not in certain areas, such as our face. You're not going to get facial hair like a beard or a mustache. Okay. Alright, so let's look at this particular syndrome, androgen insensitivity syndrome. This occurs is occasionally a girl shows all the usual signs of puberty but fails to menstruate. Now, they do have a sometimes you have a presence of testes in the abdomen, and you have a karyotype of a XY chromosome. So remember, females are supposed to have an XX chromosome. Now, testes, they produce that normal male levels of testosterone. But then we have these target cells that are gonna lack the receptors for these particular hormones. Now, the external genitalia develop the female anatomy as if no testosterone were even present. They'll have no uterus, as well. They won't have a menstrual cycle. So let's look at this chromosomal X determination. Now, our cells, they contain 23 pairs of chromosomes, correct? Okay, we have 22 pairs of autosomes and 1 pair of X chromosomes, where the XY would be the males and the XX would be the females. Alright, so the males, they produce half of the Y carrying sperm and half of the X carrying sperm. And of course, all eggs are going to carry that X chromosome. So basically, it's up to the male to determine whether or not there's going to be a female child or a male child. If the couple are going to have a boy or a girl. That's what it's basically trying to tell you. Not the female. It is up to the male based on his chromosomes. Okay? Alright, so here's this, here's what I was referring to back here with the 22 pairs of autosomes. So here's our 22 pairs of autosomes. This is what it looks like. And then that 23rd one, the very last one, and then we have 1 pair. It'll be an XY, meaning it's a male, or our XX, meaning it will be a female. Don't worry about that right here. That should be XX. I just wanted to show you guys what they were talking about. The autosomes. These are all autosomes. You have 23 pairs of autosomes. 22. You have 23 pairs of chromosomes. 22 of them are considered to be autosomes, and 1 pair of that constitutes that sex chromosomes. Okay. Alright, so the sex of a child is determined by the type of chromosome, or sorry, the type of sperm that fertilizes a woman's egg. Now, an X-carrying sperm is going to fertilize the female, and a Y-carrying sperm is going to fertilize the egg, producing a male child. Now, thus the sex of a child is determined at fertilization by the sperm. Now, sex determining does not end with fertilization, but it requires an interaction between the genetics and the hormones produced by mother and, of course, by fetus. Now, up to a certain point, a fetus is sexually undetermined. Now, its gonads begin to develop at about 5 to 6 weeks as gonadal ridges, and they're usually laying alongside a primitive kidney, which later degenerates. Now, absent to each of the gonadal ridges are 2 ducts. The mesonephric. Here it is. The mesonephric and the paramesonephric. Now, in males, the mesonephric ducts, they develop into the reproductive tract, and the paramesonephric ducts, they start to degenerate. And in females, the opposite occurs. it produces into the reproductive tract. Alright, so the Y chromosome has a gene called the SRY, and that codes for a protein called the testes determining factor, the TDF, which interacts with genes on other chromosomes. Now, by 8 to 9 weeks, the male gonadal ridge has become a type of testes that begins to secrete hormones or secrete testosterone. This is by 8 to 9 weeks. Now the testosterone, it starts to stimulate the mesonephric duct to develop into the system of a male reproductive ducts. Now by this time, the testes also secretes a hormone, the MIF factor, which causes atrophy of the paramesonephric ducts. Now, an adult, a male adult, he retains a tiny V-shaped vestige of the paramesonephric ducts in the area of the prosthetic urethra. So the level of estrogen is always high during pregnancy. The development of a female therefore results from the absence of an androgens, not the absence of estrogen. So here are your here's this development of these various structures that we were referring to. In this particular structure, or this particular diagram here, this is 5 to 6 weeks of an embryo. You cannot determine if you're going to have a male or female at this particular type. We have the mesonephrons, here is the mesonephric duct, and our paramesonephric duct. Now when we get to 7 to 8 weeks in a male child, here we have your determination of whether or not you're going to have a male. Well, everything starts to change for the male at that point in time. Let's see where it is. Okay, so here we have, this is the mesonephric ducts here. You see at the 7 to 8 weeks, it starts to form into the reproductive tract for the males. But you see right here where is the mesonephric duct. They start to disintegrate. It starts to disappear. Hence, at birth, you have the full formation of the mesonephric ducts, also called the ductus deferens. Okay, forming our testes, as well as we have the urethra, the penis, and everything has been formed at birth. Okay, but then in females, at the 8 to 9 weeks, the opposite occurs. The paramesonephric ducts remain, and they're the ones that's going to form the reproductive tract, and the mesonephric disappears. See it disappearing here in that diagram. But at birth, you see that the paramesonephric has fully formed into the uterine tube. We have our ovaries on either side, and we have the uterus. So that's the difference between the male and the female. So make sure you understand or know when it occurs, when this change or the determination of a male or female occurs, as well as what's disappearing and what is remaining. You will have that, definitely will be on your test. Alright, so let's look at development of the external genitalia. The external genitalia begins to develop from individual structures in both sexes. By 6 weeks, the embryo has the following structures. It will have a genital, tubercle, which is an anterior bud that descends to becoming the head of the penis or the clitoris. The second is the urogenital. You have a pair of those that folds and encloses the male urethra, helping to form the penis, or forms the labia minora. And the last one is the labiosacral folds, and it's a large pair of tissue folds lateral to the urogenital folds. Basically, they're going to form the scrotum for the males and the labia majora. Now, by the end of week 9, the fetus begins to show sexual differentiation, and either male or female genitalia are distinctly formed by the end of week 12. Now, in females, the 3 structures become the clitoris glands, the labia minora, as well as the labia majora. Now, in the males, the genital tubercle, it elongates to form the phallus. The urogenital folds, they start to fuse, and they're going to enclose the urethra, beginning in the phallus, and that's going to form the penis. And the labiosacral folds, they fuse to form the sacrum. So here we have it here in this particular diagram. Here we have our week 6 and week 8. Now in the males, around week 10, we have the anus that is formed here. We have the development of these glands to help form the penis, correct? Also called the phallus. So the genital tubercles, they're going to elongate, and they're going to help form. So my mouse can work. They're going to help form the penis by week 12. Now the urogenital folds, they fuse to form the urethra. And they will join the phallus to help with forming the penis. Okay, so these are the folds, these are the grooves here. Now the labiosacral folds, they're used to form the scrotum. So here are these folds here, the labiosacral folds. They help form the scrotum by week 12. And in the females, what do we have here? Similar. Now those 3 structures that we talked about earlier, which are right here, the genital tubercle, the urogenital fold, and the labiosacral fold, they're going to form the clitoris. Here's it developing here. It's going to form the clitoris, the labia minora, and then the labia majora. So make sure you know what's going to be formed by week 12 and by what. We know that these 3 are going to form the 3 major structures: the clitoris, the minor, and the major labia in the females. And make sure you understand what's going to be formed from these 3 structures here while by week 12 for males. Alright, so now both the male and female, the gonads, they initially develop near the kidneys, and then they start to descend, they sort of drop into that pelvic cavity, for the ovaries as well. Into the pelvic cavity or into the scrotum. So the pelvic cavity, the ovaries will drop into that area, and the testes will drop into the scrotum region. Now, in the embryo, a connective cord, a connective tissue cord called the gobulaculum. The gobulaculum, right here, that extends from the gonoids to the floor of the abdominal pelvic cavity. Now, in males, what's going to happen? This the gobulaculum, it continues to grow, and then it's going to pass between. Here we see it here. It's going to pass between the internal and the external abdominal oblique muscles, and then into this type of swelling, the sacral swelling. Now, independently, the peritoneum, it also develops a fold that's going to extend into the scrotum as the vaginal process, right in here. Now, this creates a path through the groin called the inguinal canal, which is the most common site for herniation in boys as well as in men. Now, the descent of the testes, it begins at as early as at week 6. Now, the superior part of the embryonic gonad, it degenerates, and the inferior part migrates downward, guided by the gobulaculum. So here's our gobulaculum. Here's our testes, and they're actually going to shift downward, and this gobulaculum is going to guide it in the correct direction that it's supposed to go into. Okay. Now, as they descend, they are accompanied by elongating testicular arteries and veins, as well as lymphatic vessels, nerves, spermatic ducts, and extensions of the internal abdominal oblique muscle. Let's stay over here, sorry. The vaginal process, it becomes separated from the peritoneal cavity to persist as the here we go, as the tunica vaginalis, and that's enfolding the anterior and the lateral sides of the testes. There you go. Now, the mechanism of descent, it becomes very obscure. Now, there are about 3% of the boys are born with undescended testes. And that's called cryptotridism. Now, in most cases, the testes descend within the first year of infancy. But if they do not, the testosterone injection, they'll get testosterone injection or surgery to help correct it. Now, uncorrected, if this condition is uncorrected, it will lead to sterility and sometimes testicular cancer. Now, the ovaries descend also, but to a lesser extent. Now, the gobulaculum, it extends from the inferior pole of the ovary to the labiosacral fold. Now, the ovaries, they initially lodge just inferior to the brim of the lesser pelvis, and the gobulaculum, it becomes a pair of ligaments that are going to support the ovaries as well as the uterus. Here's another picture here, looking at the descent of the testes, if you needed it. Alright, so for the male reproductive anatomy, now the scrotum and the penis, they start to, they constitute the external genitalia of the male, and they occupy the perineum, and it's a diamond-shaped area behind the thighs, bordered by the pubic symphysis, symphyses, as well as the ischial tuberosities and the coccyx. Now the scrotum, which is what we're looking at here, the scrotum is like a pouch of skin, like a little pendulum of skin, muscle, and of course fibrous connective tissues, and they contain the testes. Here we go. They contain the testes. So here's our scrotum, and it holds the testes. Now the skin of the scrotum now, it has deciduous glands, it has sparse hair, and rich sensory innervation, and sometimes a darker pigmentation. Alright, so I'm going to move on to a different slide so you can actually see what else I'm going to talk about. Here it is. So here we have the scrotum. Okay, now it's divided into a left and right compartments by this internal median septum. Okay, now this protects each testis from infections involving the other side. So there's an infection on the left side. This separation helps prevent the right side from also being infected as well. Now the location of the septum is external, has an external marking by the perineal raphe, which extends anteriorly along the ventral side of the penis, and then posteriorly as part of the margin of the anus. To see it going down here. Now the left testis is usually lower than the right, so that the two are not compressed against each other between the thighs. So this one is a lot lower than the right side, the left side. Now posteriorly, the scrotum contains the spermatic cord, as well as the bundle of fibrous connective tissue containing the ductus deferens, blood and lymphatic vessels, as well as testicular veins. So it holds a number of things. The first one, I'm going to repeat it again. It holds the bundle of fibrous connective tissues that are going to contain the ductus fibrans. And also, number 2, the spermatic cord. Number 3, blood and lymphatic vessels. And number 4, testicular nerves. So that's 4 things that the scrotum contains posteriorly. Okay, so I jumped ahead a few slides so you can see the spermatic cord. And this spermatic cord, you see right here, this spermatic cord is going to pass upward behind and, of course, superior to the testes. It is going to continue along the anterior side of the pubis, and then into a 4-centimeter long inguinal canal. Okay, and this is going to enter into or merge into the pelvic cavity. Now the inferior surface in the inguinal canal is the external inguinal ring, and it is its superior exit into that pelvic cavity. No, sorry, let me try that again. The inferior entrance to the inguinal cavity is the external inguinal ring, but the superior exit into the pelvic cavity is called the internal inguinal ring. Now the testes, it can produce sperm at a core temperature between 37 degrees Celsius, but it must be held at about 35 degrees Celsius. Now the scrotum has 3 mechanisms to regulate its temperature. This muscle right here, called the cremaster muscle, you see that it has stripes of the abdominal, or just like the abdominal oblique, and this muscle is going to contract and is going to draw the testes closer to the body. when it is cold. And then, of course, when the temperature gets warmer, this cremaster muscle, it relaxes and then is able to lower the testes further down, further from the body. So it's going to allow it to drop. Okay, see how the muscle is here, but then it extends and it wraps around or encloses the testes. So see in this, on the right side, they have it actually cut open, but this is it running along the outside and it wraps around. Okay, and there it is again, enclosed, and this is the enclosed testes by the cremaster. Okay, second we have the dartus muscle. Of course, this is in line with here it is right here on either side. It is a subcutaneous layer of smooth muscle and also contracts when it is cold. And then the scrotum becomes a little taut and wrinkled, helping it to hold the testes against the warm body. Then this the third one would be right here, the pampiniform plexus. All right, this area right here, an extension of network of veins from the testes that are going to surround the testicular artery in the spermatic cord. Now it cools the warm articular blood by countercurrent heat exchange, lowering the temperature of the arterial blood by 1.5 degrees to 2.5 degrees Celsius. Okay, so what are the three mechanisms to help in regulating the temperature? We have the two muscles. We have the dartus muscle that helps it also raising the testes upward when it's cold, as well as it'll give it that wrinkly look. We have the cremaster that actually moves the testes upward and downward if it's cold or warm, respectively. And then we have this plexus. It helps cool the warm arterial blood. So those are the three mechanisms. Make sure you pay attention to those three mechanisms. Alright, so when we look at the testes. Testes are combined endocrine and exocrine glands that are going to produce sex hormones and as well as sperm. Now each testis is oval and is slightly flattened. They're about 4 centimeters long and about 6 centimeters from anterior to posterior and 2.5 centimeters wide. Its anterior and lateral surfaces are covered with tunica vaginalitis. No, not vaginitis, sorry, that's inflammation. Vaginalis. And the testes has a white fibrous capsule called the tunica albugina. Let me see if I can, I think it's on this picture here. Alright, here is our vaginalis. But the other one is not here. Let's see if I can find a picture. Okay. Now the connective tissue septa that divides the testes into 250 to 300 wedge tubules, each of which contains 1 to 3 seminiferous tubules, which are ducts up to 70 centimeters long that are going to produce the sperm. Now between the seminiferous tubules are clusters of interstitial cells, and those are the source of the testosterone. Alright, so the seminiferous tubule, it has a narrow lumen that's lined by a thick germinal epithelium. And this epithelium, it consists of several layers of germ cells in the process of becoming sperm. and a smaller number of tall uh, nerve cells that protect the germ cells and promote their development. So nerve cells are Sertoli cells. Okay, those ones are going to protect the germ cells as well as promote the development of them. Now the germ cells, they rely on sustentacular cells for waste removal, growth factors, as well as for nutrients. And the sustentacular or the Sertoli cells, they're there to secrete the androgen binding protein and inhibitin, both of which are going to regulate the production of the sperm. Okay, so when we look at the BTB, which is the blood testes barrier, now that is formed by these tight junctions between the cystics, what do I call them before? Nerve cells or Sertoli cells. Those are those tight junctions that you'll find between them, and they're the ones that are going to prevent antibodies or any large molecules and interstitial fluid from getting into these germ cells. Now this barrier is important because the germ cells are genetically different from other cells. Now in some cases of sterility, in some cases sterility is going to occur when the BTB fails to form adequately in adolescence. Alright, so we're looking at the rete testes. Now the semiferous tubules, they're going to lead into a network of the rete testes, and those are embedded in the capsules on the back side, which on the posterior side. Now sperm partially mature in the rete, and then they're moved along by fluid secreted by the nerve cells and the cilia on some of the rete cells. Now sperm do not swim while in the male reproductive tract. Now each testis is supplied by a testicular artery that arises from the abdominal artery, but below the renal artery. Now this is a very long, slender artery that winds its way down the posterior abdominal wall before passing through the inguinal canal into the scrotum. Now its blood pressure is very, very low, and it is one of few arteries to have no pulse. Now blood flow to the testes is therefore meager, and oxygen is in very short supply. Now in response to sperm development, usually large mitochondria, which may help with survival to the in response to this low blood pressure and the poor O2 supply, the sperm develops a large amount of mitochondria, and they're there to help them survive in any type of hypoxic female reproductive tract. So they help with supplying proper oxygen to the testes during intercourse, is basically what they're talking about. Now, blood leaves the testes by way of the pampiniform plexus of the veins, which we mentioned earlier. Now, this merges as they pass through the inguinal canal to form the testicular vein. Now, the right testicular vein is going to drain into the inferior vena cava, and the left testicular vein drains into the left renal vein. Now, lymphatic vessels also drain into testes, and they travel through this inguinal canal with the veins and leading to the lymph nodes near the lower aorta. Now, lymph from the penis and the scrotum travels to the lymph nodes adjacent to the iliac arteries and the veins in the inguinal region. The testicular nerves, they lead to the gonoids from the spinal cord segments T10 and T11. So that's thoracic 10 and thoracic 11. Now they are mixed sensory and motor nerves, and they contain predominantly sympathetic, but also some parasympathetic fibers. Now, the sensory fibers are connected primarily with pain, and the autonomic fibers are predominantly vasomotor for regulation of the blood flow. Okay, so let's use the diagram to continue what I'm talking about. Now, after the sperm leaves the testes, it's going to travel through a series of spermatic ducts to reach the urethra. Now, there's about 12 small efferent ductiles that arise from the posterior side. The posterior side of the testes, and they're going to carry sperm to the epididymis. Here's my epididymis. See these little here are these small little spermal ducts. Okay, so these are efferent ductiles, sorry, and they're the ones that are going to carry the sperm to the epididymis. So you see, you have the head of the epididymis and you have the tail of the epididymis, and they have a cluster of ciliated cells. Now, the epididymis is a site of sperm maturity as well as for storage. So after it's produced, they're put into the epididymis, where they begin to mature, and they're stored until they're needed to be used. Now, of course, when you look at the epididymis, it has a it has a club-like head, a medium-sized body, and then it has a very slender tail. And it consists of single cord ducts about 6 meters long, or 18 feet long, and they're embedded in connective tissue. Now, this duct is going to reabsorb about 90% of the fluid secreted by the testes. Now, sperm takes about 20 days to reach the tail of the epididymis, where it is stored. Now, the sperm remains fertile for about 40 to 60 days, and if not ejaculated, they disintegrate and are reabsorbed. Okay, so the vas deferens. The vas deferens, or the ductus deferens, this is what we're looking at right here. This is the vas deferens, the ductus deferens. It begins where the tail of the duct ends, and then it straightens out. It straightens out where the duct of the epididymis, it straightens out at the tail, and then it makes a 180-degree turn. So here is our ductus deferens. Now, it is a muscular tube, and it's about 45 centimeters long and 2.5 millimeters in diameter. And it passes upward through the spermatic cord, and the inguinal canal into the pelvic cavities. You see it going up in here. Now, after passing between the bladder and the urethra, it turns downward behind the bladder, which we don't see, behind the bladder, and then it widens into a terminal apula. Now, it unites with the duct of the seminal vesicle. Now, the duct has a thick wall of smooth muscle innervated by the sympathetic nerve fibers. So where the ductus deferens and the duct of seminal vesicae meet, they form a very short ejectile duct. This duct passes through the prostate gland and then empties into the urethra. This is the last of the spermatic ducts. Now, the male urethra is shared by the reproductive and the urinary systems. And it is about 18 centimeters long, and it consists of 3 regions: the prostatic, the membranous, and the spongy urethra. So I'm going to skip ahead to some more of the diagrams, so what I'm talking about will actually make sense. So I'm going to move forward to slide 47. So everything I'm talking about is here, so you can follow along with your notes, but I'm just going to pay attention to the diagrams so it'll make a lot of sense to what I'm talking about. Alright, so here are the 3 regions of the male urethra. You have the prostatic region, you have the the prostatic urethra, the membranous urethra, and then we have the spongy or the penile urethra. Now, the urethra cannot pass through urine and semen simultaneous. It's either one or the other. Okay. So just to backtrack just a little bit about the deferens. All right. So here's our testes. Here are the efferent ducts. Remember, there's about 12 of them, and they're going to attach or help with directing the sperm to the epididymis, where things are stored and matured. They're matured and then stored. All right. So then we have the ductus deferens, which I said made that 180-degree turn, and all the way into passing through the spermatic cord and into the inguinal canal, and then into that pelvic cavity. Now, I also said it's going to pass through the bladder, which we see here. It's going to pass through the bladder, and then you see it starts to widen and is forming that the terminal ampulla. Okay. Then it's going to unite with the duct of seminal vessel, which is right here. It's going to unite with it in this particular area, right in here, and then they're going to meet with the ejaculatory duct, which is right here. So see what I was talking about makes sense. So let me just show you guys a diagram so everything makes sense. Okay, and then this duct passes where? This duct passes through the prostate gland, which you see here, and then it empties into the urethra. And then this is the last of the spermatic ducts. Okay, so let's look at some more things on this particular diagram. Continue in your notes. But we have 3 sets of accessory glands, and they're found in the male reproductive tract. We have the seminal vesicles, which I mentioned earlier. We have the prostate gland, and then we have the bulbourethral glands. So let's take a look at the seminal. Get this working here. The seminal vesicle, the seminal vesicles. As you see, there's a pair. There's one on either side of the posterior portion or the posterior view of the bladder, and one is associated with each of the duct deferens. So you have one for each of the duct deferens. Okay. Now the seminal vesicle is about 5 centimeters in length, with a connective tissue capsule, and of course the underlying layer of smooth muscle. Now the secretory portion is very convoluted. It's a very convoluted duct with numerous branches that empties into the ejaculatory duct, which is right in here. Now the yellow secretion of the seminal vesicles, it constitute about 60% of the semen. I hope you guys heard what I just said. The yellowish secretion of the seminal vesicles constitutes about 60% of the constitutes about 60%. 60%. Sorry about that percent, but 60% of the semen. Now the prostate gland, which we see here on either side, it surrounds the urethra, and the ejaculatory ducts immediately are inferior to the urinary bladder. Now it measures approximately 2 by 4 by 3 centimeters, and is an aggregate of 30 to 50 tubuloacular acinar glands in the fibrous capsule. Now this gland, it empties through about 20 pores into the urethral wall. Now the stroma consists of connective tissue and smooth muscle like that of the seminal vesicles. Now the prostate secretion, it constitutes just 30%. So this is the seminal vesicle, and this is our prostate gland. Of course, we're gonna have one more. All right. So the very last one, Cowper. You might see Cowper's. Here it is. The Cowper glands, or the globulourethral gland. They're named for their portion near the dilated bulb at the inferior end of the penis, and then their association with the urethra. So here we have it over here on both sides. They're brownish in color, spherical in shape, and about 1 centimeter in diameter and 2.5 centimeter with a 2.5 centimeter duct into the urethra. Now during sexual arousal, they produce a clear, slippery fluid that lubricates the head of the penis. Now the fluid also protects the sperm by neutralizing the acidity of the residual urine in the urethra. So remember, we said that this is the same canal, the same urethra that urine and semen pass through. So it has to be cleaned from the urine passing through, and that's where this particular gland comes into play. It's going to make sure it cleans it out, it neutralizes it before the semen passes through. Okay? So we're looking at the remaining 10%. Will come from our B gland. Okay. So that is the end of our lecture for this video. So if you have any questions, don't forget to post it. In the next videos, we'll look at the prostate diseases and the other parts of the remaining parts of the male reproductive system.